Thank you for pressing start on episode 7 of Underplayed, KZUM's indie video game podcast. Today, we reveal and review 2 secret games, followed by a cooperative look at our featured game, Carrion. I'm Bo Po. Joining me is my player 2, DiscoCola. Thank you for joining me, Disco.
Hey, man, I'm happy to be here today.
Yes, we're in season 1, episode 7.
Yeah, we're coming up on the end.
Yes, we're over the hump for season 1. How are you feeling with getting in the groove of doing these episodes?
I'm feeling great, learning a lot about games, playing more games in terms of quantity than I would otherwise. And learning how to play on deadlines sometimes.
Yeah,
so that's an interesting concept.
The deadlines we've set up for ourselves we are trying to record every 2 weeks right now. Here in 2021, we won't start pushing out these episodes for a while. We're just kind of getting a bunch of them in the bag, but excited to kind of rack up a whole season worth with you. So this is really fun. Here on Underplayed, we review indie games of all kinds, the games with small budgets but big hearts, the lesser-known experiences with imaginative ideas. We will begin the episode with our secret games.
Secret games. Secret games. Secret games. Secret games.
In this segment, we each review one indie game we've been playing it in secret since our last episode. We don't discuss our picks in advance, keeping them a surprise for this very moment. Any indie game can be chosen as long as we have not reviewed it before. We will start with you, DiscoCola. Let the mystery be no more. Reveal your secret game for episode 7 of Underplayed.
All right. Well, like you said, this episode, our featured game is Carrion. So for this episode, I wanted to turn that secret game synergy thing on its head by playing something totally different from Carrion. So for this episode, my secret game is Wattam.
No, it is not. So we should briefly describe, because I think we've hinted at it, but Wattam is an indie game that we've discussed off air when we talk about the concept of doing this show. We always throw out Wattam as this example. So having it as our secret game actually is kind of a funny big deal, but it's never actually Disco's secret game. So I always know he's lying. It's not Wattam, right?
No, it isn't.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I actually kept the synergy thing to some degree.
Okay,
so.
Good. I was going to say, that's very uncharacteristic of you.
So for this episode, my secret game is actually Bark Games' premiere game, House.
Whoa, I've not heard of this.
Yeah,
House?
This is a horror adventure game with a lot of puzzle elements, and you have the trailer there with you right now. So this game follows a young girl named Tabby. It also includes the rest of her family, her mother, her father, and her younger sister named Melody. The family has just moved into a new house, and you're exploring all the different rooms of your now mostly unpacked abode. Pretty quickly, though, you learn that there are things sort of amiss in this house, like some doors are locked for no reason. Early on, you may be walking through the living room and see a mostly like transparent, shadowy apparition walking by. Perhaps it's a trick of the eye, but like nothing to worry about. However, as the clock continues to run out, certain events befall you and or your family. So after a couple of minutes, you may hear someone in the house playing the piano from another room, and then suddenly hear like several keys crash all at once. And then when you visit that room with the piano, you may see that your little sister was playing the piano has been crushed by a chandelier. You may also visit the kitchen where your mom has been making sandwiches and she slipped on some water and died. So without intervention, you may see your cat running through the foyer while on fire.
Oh my goodness.
As the clock rolls on there are even more creatures that can appear and kill you in like a multitude of ways, including the aforementioned shadowy apparition. He can tear you in half. There's a toilet demon. There's a rug that can impale you.
Just standard everyday toilet demon.
You're no big deal.
Run-of-the-mill stuff.
You can even be killed by your deceased family cat. But if you can manage to avoid all of those monsters and you make it all the way to midnight, your father will come home and kill you instead. So, you wake up the next day fully aware that you had previously died, as made apparent by your journal entry. And this is sort of like how you are made aware of what you're supposed to be doing. It's
Interesting.
like you die, so now you have this journal that's like, hey, I remember dying. It's the same thing every day. So from there, it becomes pretty clear that you need to take a closer look at your house and figure out what items you can interact with and how those items interact with characters in special ways to affect different outcomes for the night. So you're running against the clock each day, trying to figure out how you might be able to save yourself or your family members from their predetermined destinies. Now, to be totally honest, I did see a playthrough of this game previously, but it had been a while. And to be frank, I think it's a good thing that I'd seen a playthrough before. There are a lot of elements to juggle just to get to one of the endings, and I don't know if I would have been smart or patient enough to do that in a short timeline had I not remembered a couple of these key points. Once you do survive a night, the game makes it very obvious that there are several outcomes in the form of question marks in your journal. So that's sort of a nice touch to get you interested in exploring how differently you might be able to interact with items and characters to change how the night unfolds. So this game's really creative. I'm impressed at how many different ways different items can interact with house or characters. Some of them meaningful, some of them just resulting in a fun little one-off animation. So yeah, it's unnecessary, but the attention to detail really fleshes out the depth of the game. I love the pixel art in this game, including like the really muted colors. It's kind of like someone sucked the brightness out of everything. While I do prefer that my character sprites have just a few more pixels total than the character sprites in this game, the animations are still really expressive. And as an extension of that, and probably one of the greater draws of the game overall, is the variety in death animations. There are so many fun ways to die and to watch others die, which just sounds totally sociopathic, but I really think it's one of the main elements that they built the game around. I think they started with like, I kind of want to make all these cool little like gruesome animations and let's build a game around that. And it kind of fills me with the same fascination I had as a kid watching like Nightmare on Elm Street movies, just like waiting for those fun and fantastical events to happen to your characters. The music is perfect for this kind of game. It starts off bubbly and uplifting and then turns the tone on its head as the night unfolds. It gets spooky in spooky zones or situations, all of which carry leitmotifs, so you'll notice some of the same notes going on at different points in different songs. And it really creates a full and cohesive like atmosphere. Some of the parts I don't like quite as much have to do with difficulty, I guess. I think the clock will be a little bit too tight to keep the attention of new and unspoiled players. Some of the interactable elements aren't immediately obvious in their purpose, and the hardest ones to figure out are the ones that are prerequisites for the most important stuff. I'm thinking specifically of like the milk carton from the fridge. It's one of the first items you have to get in the game, but it's not totally obvious what you're supposed to do with it. So I can see a lot of people dying a lot very, very early on and getting very discouraged. Your movement speed's also pretty slow. You can run, but you have a stamina meter that depletes pretty quickly, so balancing stamina against the clock is also very challenging. There's a speed upgrade you can grab in each run that makes things a little bit easier, but even still, it can be pretty difficult. But despite the difficulty, the game rewards you for exploring all the different scenarios. There are multiple endings, and even an additional ending locked behind achieving all of those other endings. So after growing and dying with Tabby so many times, you really do want to stick it out and see how everything unfolds with this final ending. All that being said, I wanted to give the game a 7.5, but I went back on it a little bit. I think I'm going to give it an 8. The music is awesome. I listened to the soundtrack today, even for funsies. I think playing it on a deadline hurt my thoughts, but I do remember like being very taken by it when I first watched that playthrough. Using keyboard controls is something I'm not used to, and it's something I had to do because I just didn't have time to set up a controller.
Sure.
Maybe if I would have played with a controller, I would have felt a little bit better, died a few fewer times. But I do still think that some of the puzzle elements are a little bit too hard and that I still would have been really frustrated pretty often. But if I didn't have that deadline, maybe like this is the kind of game where I might be cooking dinner and then suddenly have an epiphany like, oh, I wonder if I took, this item in this room at this time, maybe that will change things. So if I would have had a little bit more time, I could have felt a little bit better about that. But otherwise, I think once I get all of the different endings, and there's a couple of like optional ones, I think once I get all those different endings, I don't really see myself going back to the game. Maybe unless I just want to explore all the different death animations for fun. So yeah, that's House. As of this recording, it's only available on Steam. But the game also does have a lot of awesome reviews, so I wouldn't be totally shocked if console versions came out in the future. But I haven't heard any whispers to suggest that's the case.
Well, one thing that shocked me as you were starting to talk about this game, you also send me, this gameplay trailer to watch so I can kind of absorb what this looks like, how it generally feels when you're playing it. And you're right, the pixel art is not too complex. It's very simplistic, actually. But it's what the pixel characters are doing that is exceptional. Like one of the first pieces of violence you see is this guy dressed in black just comes out and stabs you in the face. And it's very violent. There's a part in the trailer with, the spikes coming out of the ground and impaling you and all kinds of weird like hands reaching out towards you. So yeah, you don't see this kind of thing from pixel art games that kind of look this. It's a minimalist approach to pixel.
I think if your character model has eyes that are 1 pixel each, it's a little simple.
Yes, very minimalistic. I also have noticed there have been lots of games that kind of fit into this subgenre that deals with time loops.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking of 15 minutes as I was writing my notes.
So 12 minutes.
12 minutes, sorry.
There's 12 minutes, The Lost City, Deathloop, Returnal. So you'd put this game into that subgenre that has been really popular here in like 2021 and 2020, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then do you want to collect all the events or did you fill out the journal?
I think the hardest ones are the ones that are sort of required at the beginning. The other ones, I mean, these optional ones that I'm talking about, they're not obvious, I think, is the problem. So it's like, it's something I've already looked up on how to do. If I wouldn't have done that, I would have never figured it out because there's no clues to it. But it's such a small time commitment at that point that there's no reason not to.
Gotcha.
The hardest part is just switching my stream setup, honestly, to PC, which I wouldn't even have to do if I didn't want to.
Interesting. Well, it's called House. It's the first title from Bark Games, which is really cool. So check out their debut if you like very strange, quirky horror games.
With the clout this has gotten, I am very excited to see what they do next because there's going to be something.
All right. Well, it's time for my secret game. My secret game is Sky Children of the Light. This is an online open world adventure platformer developed by a company that you probably are very familiar with, Disco.
Oh, that could be a number of things.
The developer is That Game Company.
Oh, it does look like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this was originally released in 2019. In Sky Children of the Light, you play as a child of light. You soar through 7 different realms to find fallen stars and restore them to their constellations. So if you're familiar with That Game Company, they're a very popular indie game creator. They have a few hits from over the years. They made Flow and Flower and Journey. Journey won a ton of like Game of the Year awards. It is the game a lot of people think of when they think of like, wordless, like short adventure indie games. So Sky Children of the Light is very much inspired by what That Game Company did in Journey. But I would say that Sky has more of an emphasis on online features. So in Journey, what you're doing in Journey is you're trying to find, the summit of this mountain. And there's a little bit of a story through wordless pieces of narrative, quick cut scenes that kind of give you a brief idea of what's going on. And you kind of fill in the gaps yourself as to what it all means. But along the way, you can run into other people going on journeys. The whole game takes about, 2.5 hours to complete. You might run into other players, and it's more of an incidental thing than anything. It's kind of like hey, I'm not doing this thing on my own. There are other people out there in the world doing this, and that's kind of cool. And, we can kind of help build this bridge together, and then it helps me get to where I'm going faster. Well, this game, Sky Children of the Light, really emphasizes the online piece of meeting other people. The gameplay relies on flying and traversing through large areas. Just like Journey, you have this magic cape that can be upgraded with a collectible called Winged Light. The more of those you collect, the more jumps or floats that you can have so that you can reach new areas as you collect more stuff in this game. You can discover these spirits, and when you bring them back to life, they allow you to buy things. And there are multiple currencies. You can collect candles, which unlock expressions that your character can emote. You can use these one-time use blessings, which, an example of one of those, I think there's one where you can use these blessings to reveal other players near you in a more enhanced way for a limited amount of time. You also have hearts, another currency that can be used to purchase cosmetic items. Like I said, you can access and explore 7 different areas through kind of a home island. You pick which area you want to go to. Each area is very beautiful. There are lots of billowy clouds. There are wide open areas to fly through, and everything has a very clean look overall. So a lot of the aesthetic from Journey definitely carries over as inspiration for how Sky Children of the Light looks. On the online portion, there are tons of social aspects. So you can run into strangers and you can offer to friend them. You can offer to symbolically light, I think it's a candle of theirs. You can hold out your candle to light theirs. And that's kind of an extension. It's an invitation of sorts. If you make friends with people, you can eventually give them gifts. And then I think you can communicate to them through the expressions that you collect. You can also leave these text messages for other players to stumble across. So there are kind of predetermined areas in the game where you can run into messages people have typed out, and it's really whatever they want to say to you. And unlike other games where there might be a hint system to the messages where someone might warn you of an impending danger, these messages don't really have as strong of a reason to exist. It's kind of just an excuse for you to leave whatever you want for people to read. A lot of the times I ran into these messages, they were nonsensical things, honestly. They were things like, my dog's name is Max, and it had a bunch of likes on it. So not really functional in the way that other messaging systems are in other online games. And then the game, I have to say, runs really well with all this online stuff going on. If you run into other people, it's usually smooth. At least it was for me. I guess it depends on your own internet connection. That plays a huge part. But I never had a problem with dropping out or seeing other players, be glitchy and framey, if that makes sense. So I will say this game is pretty fun when you're just kind of flying through the areas and exploring the beauty. But there's so much to this game that I think it doesn't do that well, unfortunately. The whole experience from finding spirits and candles to interacting with others generally can feel empty. The game doesn't make a good enough argument as needing to be an online experience, in my opinion. The interactions are pretty shallow. Finding other players feels incidental rather than necessary, so it doesn't really make sense that they really push the online stuff in your face. A lot of the systems feel tacked on. The currencies are poorly explained, and the things you buy with them are unexciting. I mentioned those expressions. a lot of those are just kind of additional moves that you can do to emote things. And I never found myself wanting to do that. The menus and UI are clunky too. They rely really heavily on iconography and way too little on words to tell you what's going on. Things are very vague in this game. I think at the core, there's a very beautifully simple idea, but it's just bogged down by all these poorly explained features that really want to be innovative. I think the game just needs to trust more of the simplicity that makes Journey a wonderful game. I ended up struggling with finding motivation to play Sky Children of the Light just because so much of it was inscrutable, unfortunately. I would recommend this game to players looking for a light, carefree game with little story. If you just want to be in kind of a carefree vibe and just chill out and fly around, I think this game would have something for you. People looking for wholesome, basic interactions with other players. You might not be able to talk to them, like actually verbally communicate with them. But if you want to just have a little satisfaction in knowing that, hey, there's someone else in the world right now playing this game at the exact same time as me, and I'm lighting their candle, whatever that might be worth to you. And then the game is also free to play with the option to buy cosmetics to support the developers. So little risk with playing this game. You can try it out for a few hours, see if it's your thing. If it's not, like it was for me, then you haven't really wasted a lot of time and a lot of money. So because this game mostly wasn't for me, I'm rating it a 4.5 out of 10, unfortunately. I would much rather replay Journey at least a couple times than play more of Sky Children of the Light, just because Journey is so focused in what it's doing and very beautiful and is just confident in its simplicity. So I wish Sky Children of the Light could do that.
Okay. There's a couple things I'm noticing from this gameplay video that you sent me. One of the things is that I think it looks way too much like Journey. Like, Journey's a good game, but like if you're going to make a new game that's not in the same universe or story necessarily, there's a little too much of inspiration you can draw from your own work, I think. So I feel that a little bit. I wonder, do you know, can you interact with more than one character simultaneously?
I think, yeah, you can eventually. I think I ran into at least two people at the same time several times. Most of the time when I ran into somebody else and they hung around me, it was just that one person, and then I might see like a third person running by really quickly, and then they, peace out and do their own thing.
Okay.
I did try making friends with people just to see what that was like. That was kind of a mixed bag. It entirely depends on who you run into. There is a way to connect with your real friends. So like you could actually organize to meet up with me in Sky. I was doing research online. It seemed a little complicated there's a lot of steps. So I think there might be some fun here if you have a friend to sit down and play this with, and you can organize getting together.
I was going to say, I wonder if like in this era of streaming party games like Among Us and stuff like that, if maybe that is where some more of the fun could come in. But if it's anything like Journey, and it looks like it's a lot like Journey, I feel like having too many people on screen at the same time would ruin the experience rather than enhance it.
Yeah, potentially. I would have liked to test playing with somebody I know, but that was very hard to do in 2 weeks, and it's
the one person you could do it with is not supposed to know what you're playing.
All right, it's a secret game. In hindsight, maybe it would have been a fun candidate for featured cooperative review, but who knows?
Yeah.
It seemed like there were certain stages where you needed like another person to help you open a door, but you could still complete the whole thing with just playing solo too. So I think there is more content for those who want to go above and beyond and find other people to play with. But yeah, unfortunately I didn't get to explore a lot of the social friend stuff just because it was so hit or miss as far as like how far I could take a relationship with complete strangers. And after a few minutes, I didn't really care to like see it through in that way. I just kind of wanted to play by myself. And in the end, I think I just would have had more fun playing Journey. So I think the developers, that game company, I think they have said that they want to continue working on Sky. They have seasonal events where you can get, skins and costumes that are seasonal. I think they want to make more games that are in the Sky universe. So this is like Sky : Children of the Light. I think they are planning for more Sky games. This game came out, in its original form in 2019. The Switch version only just came out here in 2021.
Mhm.
So I think this is going to be an ongoing kind of world that they build, not just within Children of the Light, but in future games. And I have to say, Disco, I still trust that game company.
Yeah.
After what I played in this game, I will try whatever they make next, even if it's more Sky. I would give another Sky game a chance.
That sounds like it could be cool. Like building out books,
Yes,
essentially. Like
yeah.
having a manga book collection on your shelf of Sky games.
I watched an interview with some of the developers, and I think that that's kind of the gist of what they were talking about with their ambitions. So that's Sky: Children of the Light, one that I really wanted to love more, but maybe you'll enjoy it. I think I'm in the minority. Lots of reviewers online love this game, so give it a try. It's free. It's playable on iOS, Android, and Switch. Those are our secret games. Let's move on to our featured review of Carrion. So Carrion is a 2020 reverse horror game developed by Phobia Game Studio, where players take control of an amorphous tentacled monster held in a research facility operated by Relith Science. The monster spreads its biomass throughout various zones and consumes scientists and soldiers to become stronger in its search for an exit to freedom. Disco, Carrion is one example of a featured review game that one of us has already played, and that person is you.
Yes.
So tell me, what makes Carrion so different from other horror games you've played?
Well, to be honest, I haven't played a ton of horror games. First, I do want to say that this is also one of the few cooperative review games that we've actually played together, in the same room. It's a single player game, but we had an event where we were passing the controller at a party, and Carrion was one of the games that we played.
Yeah, so the background here is you played this a year ago. We decided on this for our featured review, and we both touched it at this party this last week. We saw it through to the end, and you also replayed it on your own, and I also played a lot of it on my own solo. Yep. So we've really become familiarized with this game, both together and apart, in the past few days. So you haven't played a lot of horror games, but I guess what I'm getting at with that is it's very interesting that this is a reverse horror game. That's how it's being marketed. You play as a monster, you're stalking the prey, you're strategizing about how to go about this facility and how to take on all these humans that are both running away from you and trying to fight you. So I think that's inherently interesting. It feels like a very innovative game. I want to know, since you had played this game already about a year ago and you're revisiting it now, what are your overall thoughts after replaying the game?
A lot of my loves and criticisms of this game, and I do love this game a lot, most of my criticisms and loves stayed the same. I feel pretty much the same. I don't have that initial, I can't put it down feeling because I have finished it. When I first got the game, I was still on paternity leave, and I turned the game on after my wife went to bed because I was essentially staying up all night for the baby while she did daytimes. But before I knew it, it was 5 a.m. and I had finished the game because I couldn't put it down. That subsided a little bit, but otherwise, everything that I loved about the game, I still love about the game. The things that I don't like, I still don't like. So,
okay.
Yeah, I can go into that if you want.
Yeah, overall thoughts. On Carrion.
So like I said, my loves vastly outweigh the criticisms, so I'll start with some of my criticisms. The main one is simply orientation within the world. So you may play as a mindless hunger machine, but you yourself as a human are not a mindless hunger machine, so it should be a lot easier to orientate yourself in this world. but it's not. It's really easy to get lost. And I don't totally know what that is. It could be, the different zones do try to vary their look with different design elements. But at the same time, they all have this like gray stone or like, facility look. There's a lot of gray, regardless of what zone you're in. So maybe that's why it's easy to get lost.
A lot of metal gates.
Yeah.
And metal crates everywhere. Yes.
Maybe one of the other reasons it's easy to get lost is that the point at which you enter most zones is not an entry point later. So like you'll enter most zones through what is later on a save point. And so that could be, maybe it's hard to orientate yourself in relation to other zones because of that. I don't know. The point is, even having played this now for like the third and a half time on my own, I was still getting lost. The game's pretty linear overall, just as you start to play through it, but you do get to revisit old zones to do item cleanup and stuff, but it's so easy to get lost or not know what direction to go in like the hub-ish area to figure out how to get to that one zone that you need to go back to.
Right. And for listeners, if this kind of sounds like it's Metroidvania-y, it kind of is. You're collecting abilities throughout the game that allow you to access certain areas you couldn't before, but it's not as crucial to the gameplay design as something like Castlevania or Metroid or something like that.
Right.
And the game doesn't have a map that you can like pause to look at. There's no map that you can uncover. You really are just using your memory and intuition to make your way throughout this facility.
And that's, that's a strong point against it. Like, obviously it doesn't make sense for a flesh monster to have a map, but like when I was streaming, I got that question more than once. It's like, do you have a map you can look at? I'm like, no.
When we were playing together, I think I asked you that. Like, is there a map in this game?
Yep. So it's something that I heard a lot. And then one of the other things I don't like about it is how hard it can be to control your character near the end of the game as you sort of reach your full capacity.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of sucks that it's so hard to get into smaller spaces when you get so large. It kind of feels like it's punishing you for progression.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Right.
But other than that, everything else is really great. With the exception of one ability in the whole game, it's really fun to use, like your entire arsenal. Movement is really fun through the game, except for, like I said, that very end where you get to be a little too large. Interacting with the man snacks is a fun time.
I love it.
Yeah.
Is that used in the marketing for the game, or did you come up with that? Okay.
I was just thinking about bug snacks.
Man snacks.
This game really lends itself to like self-imposed challenges, sort of like an Untitled Goose Game might. So for example, I once tried to do like a pacifist run where I avoided killing all the humans except for ones that were mandatory to progress.
Sure.
Very challenging, by the way.
I bet.
Super fragile.
This game wants you to kill things, turns out.
It gets very easy to do that, even on accident. I also did a playthrough where I tried to destroy everything, including like interactable environmental elements.
Oh.
Just like totally destroying them so that you couldn't even grab them anymore.
There's a lot of those too.
Yes.
There's a lot of like optional, like destroy this barrier using this ability thing.
Exactly.
And it doesn't lead you anywhere.
Exactly.
It's just kind of there. Yeah.
And so that you can create, new ways to play the game, which is super cool. The music is perfect for this kind of game. As with a lot of horror games, it doesn't really play well on the radio, as I like to say, which means it's like, it doesn't sound good without the context of the game. You can't just like sit there and listen to it. So yeah, if you want, I can give it my score. You ready for that?
What do you score, Carrion?
All right. I'm going to give this game a 9.5 out of 10.
Holy mackerel.
It's another 9.5 after
right
Hades.
up there with Hades for
Yep.
you. That is fascinating.
Hades
Wow.
obviously has a lot more to offer, but that doesn't mean this game is without its replay value, like I said. And it's one of those games that you can play to decompress. It's not the same as like your cookie clicker kind of games, but it's cathartic instead of just like repetitive. So yeah, I intend to play this for funsies several times in the future. I didn't have time to finish the DLC, but I started it and it looks way more in depth than I expected. So I'm excited to explore something new in Carrion. But yeah, I have to score it that high because like when I think about the emotions that I feel with Carrion and the emotions that I feel with Hades, I still feel stronger with Carrion. Like, I feel those emotions stronger with Carrion. I think Hades is a better game, but I like Carrion more.
Well, what I said earlier about the innovation, that really informs my love for this game, because there are lots of games that make you play as the killer, as the monster. But this one just feels so different than other games I've played.
I think, if I may add to that real quick before you move on, I think there's like something interesting about the power imbalance. Like, you are such a powerful character, so like the stakes are different.
It is. I mean, cathartic is a great word to describe this. I actually have that written down in my notes. Like, it's a refreshing take on the horror genre. It feels very cathartic to play. I echo that sentiment a lot. It makes you feel like you're the monster in John Carpenter's The Thing, you know, if you've ever seen that movie. It's a wonderful discovery of new abilities as you play. It's fun to discover the new facility areas, but really the excitement is, what new ability am I going to get even stronger? Like, I'm already starting strong. I can fling these guys all over the room. I can smash them down into the ground over and over, and their limbs are flying everywhere, and I eat them for sustenance. And the game wants to give me more. Like, that feels so good. The enemies do get stronger as you go, though. So I think the game does appropriately ramp up in difficulty. Some sections are actually kind of brutal.
Yeah.
But a lot of the sections for me just took a few replays, just a few deaths, and I kept sailing on through, which feels like the perfect balance there. It strikes another great balance between feeling very precise and chaotic. The movement is fast and powerful. You use your tentacles just automatically. You can walk in any direction in this 2D plane, and you can just like walk up, the middle of a room, and your tentacles just do all the work for you, and it looks really convincing. But the chaotic part of it is that, when you're in a combat scenario, the camera is shaking, and it feels like the camera has turned into like a horror movie camera, where like, this is the confrontation of the monster with the victims. And it's just so well done. There's a gracefulness to controlling the monster, especially when you use the tentacles to grab things. Slaughtering enemies is fun. The grabbing can sometimes feel a little inconsistent if there's a lot of things to grab. It's like you want to grab a specific thing and you aim in the general direction. And sometimes it's a guess about whether you'll pick up the thing. But again, only in situations where there are like 3 things to grab in a small area. It's the perfect length. It's 5.5 hours or so. It gives you enough. It doesn't overstay its welcome. The animations of all the living things are very detailed. When I think of the ideal 2D indie game look, I think about how the creatures and humans in this game look. That detailed, kind of different than House. There's more detail in these characters. At first blush, it's very simple with what it's doing, but when you really examine the animations, there's a lot going on. Kind of Metroidvania light. There are abilities that allow you to access previously inaccessible areas. It's not as heavily emphasized as like Axiom Verge, like we already discussed. A lot of the abilities are surprising. So like, I found myself thinking like, oh, this is inspired by monsters from other works. Like when you would get an ability to, mind control a dead body, or coat yourself in keratin. It's like a greatest hits of sci-fi monster powers that you're collecting in this game. So I think that's really cool. I liked all the containment units, which are these collectibles where the game asks you to do these puzzle sections. It's just a nice little dash of puzzle that you're doing every now and then that make you think about how to use all your abilities in conjunction. When it comes to my problems, I agree with you about all the navigation stuff, and the game grinds to a halt if you get lost. Navigating back through areas for all the containment units was a nightmare for me. I had to look all those routes up online. When you can access all the previously explored areas at the end of the game, you're in that kind of hub world, and you just have no sense about where all of the places are. It's nonsensical. It's paths snake all over the place. And it's hard to reference a map because you can't reference a map. So it's hard to know where to go. You just have to use your memory or a guide, which is what I did. There's also, as the game progresses, you have 3 levels that you can grow or shrink to. There's like the small version, what you start with. There's the medium version, and then there's like the level 3. There's the large. And there's this recurring puzzle mechanic of growing or shrinking your levels. You deposit it's called biomass, or you can retrieve your biomass to grow big again. And you use this to access different ability sets. So you need to be your smallest form to go invisible, for instance. But if you're your biggest size, you can't go invisible. You have to deposit your biomass. I eventually found that a little tiresome. Like, I didn't want to do that anymore. I just thought it was a little overused. At a certain point, I just want to be able to use all my moves without worrying about how big I am. Just let me use all my moves, I've learned. Like, why can't the big carrion creature become invisible? Why does he have to be small? Like,
There's enough buttons on the controller for it.
Right. I mean, even if it's like almost like an ability wheel, like a weapon wheel where we can select something, I would have preferred that probably. But overall, Carrion makes you feel powerful while still being challenging. The navigation shortcomings get in the way of it feeling seamless. But nonetheless, I think it's an original idea that has fun puzzles and combat. My score for this thing is 7.5 out of 10. So
Okay.
this is one game where we differ quite a bit in our score, 2 full points away from each other, but I'm still very positive on the game.
Yeah, and a lot of mine comes from feeling. It's a very emotional score.
Yes, and you take into account certain things like music more heavily, or like your memories with your first playthrough, and I think you're generally more generous with scores, which there's nothing wrong with that. So there's a little bit of story in this game.
Yeah.
Too. There's some scientists discovering the monster, how it came to be, and you actually get to play as the scientists. What did you think of those parts?
Those are actually my least favorite parts of the game. Yeah, I don't enjoy playing as human characters.
Yeah, did we need to play as them, do you think? Could that have been cutscenes? Did that even need to be there? You know what I mean?
Well, as boring as I found those sections and as much as I dread coming to them whenever I start the game up again, I do think it plays into the ending of the game and makes that a little bit more obvious, a little bit more poetic even, I would say. So as much as I dread, I just, if those sections were a little bit shorter, if I didn't have to travel quite as far as a human character, maybe I wouldn't have as much a problem with those.
I agree with you about the end. I think the end kind of redeemed those sections a little bit. I was like, oh, wow, that's cool. It makes me think about what might be next in this story. It kind of opens the door for a sequel, maybe, at least from a narrative perspective. But I maybe would have preferred just seeing a few cutscenes throughout that were shorter than those human gameplay sections, and then end with what happens at the end, and in this exact same way. And I think it would have hit maybe a little stronger for me in that way.
I want to go back to your containment units. I forgot to even mention those. Big thing that I'm a fan of is item collection. Love games with a lot of item collection. I think that's actually one of the weakest points of the game because most of the game is really linear and you need all of these items or these moves to go back. You also need certain gateways to be open to go back. You don't get these containment units until some of them toward the very end of the game. And each one gives you a little buff that would have been nice earlier in the game.
You don't get enough time with the buff to enjoy the reward of doing them. Yeah.
Some of them are pointless altogether because here's a spoiler. If you want
I think I know what you're about to say. Yeah.
If you want to experience this game for yourself, click away for a little while.
Seconds.
Yeah. But there's no final boss fight or there's no final confrontation. So some of these containment units you can't get until the very end. And then by that point, they serve no purpose.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also certain ones like, adds fire resistance or something like that. If you're at the end of the game, you've beaten the game and now you can like reload your save file and now go for like all the trophies or all the collectibles or whatever. Enemies don't respawn, really. There might not be any more enemies that shoot flame at you. So you can't even, there's no like cleanup there that warrants like needing those buffs to aid your quest to collect everything. So I do agree with you. I think my fun with those just came from the act of actually doing them.
Yeah, and some of those
And
puzzles are super cool.
They're really satisfying and made me think about the abilities in a different way. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it would have been cool to spread those out, give me access to them sooner, make it so that I don't have all of these roadblocks standing in my way to even access them before I'm even able to solve them. So, favorite encounters or strategies? I know there are no big memorable fights, but there are certain different enemy types. Did you have a favorite or maybe least favorite kind of encounter in the game?
I think the most satisfying thing is to go up against the walking drones for the first time and get totally wrecked.
Annihilated, yes.
But once you get your possession ability to take possession of one of those and just clear a room with no problem.
Yeah, you're talking about the mechs that walk really slowly and
Yeah.
they just like rain fire on you when they not flamethrower, but gunfire.
It is super satisfying to do that. So I love taking possession, I think is my favorite strat when I can pull it off. It's a little bit more like time consuming than just rolling your terrible body through the room. But it's so much more fun and satisfying to like destroy your lunch as your lunch.
I actually don't think I possessed a mech, like a guy in a mech. I think I just ripped them apart. You know, I ripped off the back tentacle or whatever and the armor and then just like pulled out all the humans from the mechs. You know, that's kind of fun too, but you're kind of juking around with them so that they don't shoot you and running around them to access their backside, which can be kind of stressful. One of my favorite strategies was just like hanging out under a platform where there were dudes and then picking up like a metal box with a tentacle and then massaging it onto the platform above me. And I'm still under the platform, but my one tentacle hanging onto the metal box, I can now swing it and hit all the dudes on the platform above me and just like obliterate them. And they can't hurt me because my main body isn't up where they are, so they can't shoot at me yet. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but there's a lot of that kind of almost awkwardness, but it's fun awkwardness to picking up items and kind of slinging them around in really erratic ways. I loved doing that as like a strategy, and it felt like I was cheating whenever I was doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Like it wasn't intended, but I also know it was totally intended. So, any other points about Carrion that we haven't covered?
No, I think it's such it's a surprisingly fun party game. Like we were at the party together and the point of the party was to play Carrion. And another one of our friends was there and he was working on his Christmas list. And I happened to look over his shoulder and Carrion was added
That's funny.
to his Christmas list because of what we were experiencing.
It is a fun game to watch someone else play. Actually, I'd say it's just as fun to watch as it is to play it yourself, which few games you can say that about. So it's a great kind of twist on the horror genre. It's a game we both liked. You loved Disco. I'm glad we played this for Underplayed, and thank you for the suggestion. So that's our review of Carrion. You can play it on Nintendo Switch, PS4, Xbox One, PC, Mac, and Linux. Disco rated it a 9.5. I rated it a 7.5. That's the end of this episode of Underplayed. You can find more of our episodes at kzum.org/underplayed. Our music was composed by Jack Rodenberg. Our art comes from Onimochi. My name's Bopo, and you can find me on Twitter at Bopo. That's BO_PO.
And I'm DiscoCola on Twitter and streaming most of these Underplayed games on Twitch.
Next time, we will have 2 more secret games, and our featured review will cover Hyper Light Drifter, a 2D action-adventure developed by Heart Machine. Until then, everyone, keep on playing.